So to keep in the theme of these videos being about things that are happening week to week, I actually have a fantastic story to share that really shone on my faith. It's funny how sometimes when you can feel like everything's humming along in the right direction and that you're sharing your faith and that you're being a bold advocate for Christ, God can sort of nudge you like a nurturing father and remind you of the areas you're still going wrong. And he did that to me this week. So to give you some context, I work in an office in a series of desks, and every day at 10:30 I have an alarm set that goes off, and it's titled Jesus. And its sole purpose is to cut through the noise, whatever I'm doing at that moment, and just give me an opportunity to think about him just for a moment, to reset myself and reorient and remember where I'm going and why I'm doing this. And sometimes I wander off, I go to meetings or I go see people in the departments, and my timer goes off when I'm not at my desk. And that happened this week, and one of my colleagues who sits next to me went to my desk and turned my alarm off. And when I got back to my desk, he told me, hey, your 10:30 alarm went off. And I could see in his eyes that he was curious, because all the alarm says is Jesus and then stop. He wanted to know what it was about, why that alarm went off. And instead of taking that opportunity and running with it and seeing that God is authoring moments in our lives to allow us to share the gospel with people we sometimes wonder how we could possibly share the gospel with, my flesh jumped in. And immediately I said, oh, that's just a timer reminding me to stop sitting down for so long. Now, I have timers that do that, don't get me wrong, but in that moment when I could have told him exactly why, that I was a Christian, that I've always been a Christian, that I love the Lord, that my whole mission is to share everything that I know about the Lord, instead of doing that in that moment, I walked away from it. I denied Jesus the same way that Peter denies Jesus 3 times before the rooster crows. And I felt absolutely awful. That was God highlighting a weakness and a flaw that I still am yet to master. It's still a journey, and I want to talk about that fear today. Now, we're going to spend most of our time in the book of Luke, and there are 3 verses that we want to look at. The first of those is Luke 12, verse 4. It says, I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after that they have nothing more that they can do. So I think that verse really sums up what's going on when we are afraid of sharing Jesus to anyone in our immediate vicinity, whether those are people who are close to us, friends and family, or strangers, acquaintances and work colleagues. It's this fear on a continuum of what will happen to us if we share our love about Jesus. They might laugh at me. They might think I'm crazy. They might get angry. They might isolate me. They might get physically reactive. Maybe they'll punch me, but maybe they'll kill me. Right? And Jesus is telling us here, no matter what thing they do that you fear on that spectrum of reactions, even at the very worst of them, don't fear even death. So it cuts through all of that noise, is that when we have that intense fear that we'll be outcast because we know that the world hates us, and so the reaction of someone of the world is going to be one of hatred back towards us. In some cases, at least that's what we fear. Jesus tells us not to worry even in the most severe of reactions. Now, in fact, I often think about Matthew 7, verses 13 to 14, where it talks about the way to heaven being narrow. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. I remember reading about this when I was a kid. If you could see it, that you're on this highway headed towards destruction, and it just drops off. There's a cliff into hell. And then as you're walking, you see this little sign saying, salvation found this way. And when you look at that path, you see that it is this narrow, rocky path up this huge mountain. And everyone else that you know is walking down this highway, this smooth highway, cruising along on the highway to hell, having a good time. They're all together. But someone asks you and says, hey, if you come this way, I've got good news. The journey's not easy. It's not fun. There'll be storms and rain and wind, and you'll feel alone and hungry and tired and isolated, and you'll still look back and see everyone having a good time on this highway. But he says, what I've seen up this hill, from where I've been on top of this mountain, I can see that they're headed for destruction, and that this narrow, rocky path actually leads to better life just on the other side. That's the promise. That's the trust. If you come with me, you'll see that. That's the kind of good news that we're trying to share to people. And the fear we have to overcome is that of Luke 12, which is that they might kill our bodies. They might kill us or persecute us in this earthly life. But the reality is we need to have that mind that we're trying to share this message to people that gives them a path to life, and that should conquer the fear of what they can do to us in this earthly realm. Now, to add to that, to give us another incentive to not deny Christ, we go back in Luke to Luke 9 verse 26, where Jesus tells us very plainly, "For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels." So in this earth, if we know Jesus Christ, and yet we're afraid when we're sitting down for coffee with our work colleagues and they say Jesus Christ, or people who believe in religion are just nutso, and you sit there and sort of just nod along silently, not participating but not saying anything to the contrary, which we're called to do. If you are ashamed of Jesus and of his words, of you, he will be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels, everything that we've ever desired for. When you see him coming down, you think, finally Jesus is coming. He goes, I don't think I sit with you, because you didn't sit with me, knowing that you had good news to share with them. So there are two very harsh warnings here. Now, these are warnings to not deny Christ, but what is the encouragement to actually go and spread Christ? Well, we're still in Luke. We go back to Luke 12 again. It tells us in Luke 12 verse 8, "And I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before men," not ashamed, but acknowledges me, "the Son of Man also will acknowledge before the angels of God." We think about that imagery. Jesus is standing in the heavenly courts with all the angels worshipping the throne, and he puts you in his hands and says, acknowledge him or her, my trusted believer, because they didn't deny me on earth. That's the reward that we get. That's what cuts through the fear of telling someone who Jesus is and why you believe in him and love him. And so for some further encouragement to really kill those doubts about what will happen to you if you share Jesus, we stay again in Luke 12, verse 11 to 12. "And when they bring you before the synagogues and the rulers and the authorities, do not be anxious about how you should defend yourself or what you should say, for the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say." So even if we're afraid that we won't have the words, or that they're a smarter person than us, or that they're just going to bring too much science and worldly information in and they won't listen to us and they'll speak over us and we're not good communicators, and all these earthly fears that we have coming in from the enemy, Jesus says, who cares? Who cares how well you can speak? It doesn't matter what you know, what words you have. The Holy Spirit will fill you in that moment. It will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say, whether that's before synagogues or courts or rulers or judges or friends or family and loved ones and co-workers and strangers. So that, my friends, is my word for the week. Acknowledge Christ and he will acknowledge you. Be ashamed of Christ and he will be ashamed of you. And you do not want that. None of us want that. I pray that you have a blessed week, and I will see you next time.